I still check the back seat every single time I get in my car now, even in broad daylight. This was 3 winters ago when I was working the overnight shift at a 24-hour diner off Route 9. I was 22, living paycheck to paycheck, and the graveyard shift paid an extra $2 an hour. Most nights were quiet. Truckers, insomniacs, the occasional drunk couple. I didn't mind it. The tips were decent, and my manager let me do homework between orders. That night started normal. We'd gotten snow earlier in the week, and the parking lot was still patchy with gray slush and salt stains. I clocked in at 11 p.m., and by midnight the place was dead. One guy sat at the counter nursing coffee and working on a laptop, a family with 2 sleeping kids in a booth. That was it. Around 1:30 a.m., a woman came in alone, mid-30s maybe. She had long, dark hair pulled into a ponytail and wore a puffy winter coat that looked expensive. She sat at a booth near the window and ordered just coffee. Nothing unusual about that. People came in all the time to kill an hour or warm up. What struck me was how she kept looking at the parking lot, not casually, like someone waiting for a ride. She'd stare out the window for a long time, then glance at her phone, then back to the window. Her hands were shaking when I brought her coffee. "You okay?" I asked. She looked up at me quickly, like she'd forgotten I was there. "Yeah, fine." I left it alone. About 20 minutes later, she got up and walked to the restroom. She was in there for a while, long enough that I started to wonder if something was wrong. When she came back, she looked pale. She sat back down and didn't touch her coffee. The guy at the counter left around 2 a.m. The family left shortly after. That left just me, the cook in the back, and the woman by the window. She kept checking her phone. Every few minutes, she'd pick it up, look at the screen, and put it back down. She never typed anything, never made a call, just checked it. Around 2:30 a.m., she waved me over. "Can I ask you something?" she said quietly. "Sure. If I gave you $20, would you walk me to my car?" I hesitated. It wasn't a weird request exactly. The parking lot was dark and empty, but something about the way she asked made my skin prickle. "Is someone bothering you?" I said. She looked at me for a long moment, then she shook her head. "No, I don't want to walk out there alone." I told her I'd ask my manager. He was in the back doing inventory and barely looked up when I explained. "Yeah, sure, just make it quick." When I came back to tell her, she was already standing with her coat on. She handed me a 20. I tried to wave it off, but she pressed it into my hand. "Please," she said. We walked out together. The cold hit immediately. My breath clouded in front of me, and the wind cut through my uniform. She led me to a silver sedan parked near the back of the lot, away from the lights. That struck me as odd. Why park so far away? She unlocked the car with her key fob, and the lights blinked. She opened the driver's door and stood there for a second, not getting in. "Thank you," she said. I nodded and started to turn back toward the diner. That's when I heard her gasp. I spun around. She was frozen, staring into her car. I stepped closer and looked inside. There was a man in her back seat. He was sitting upright, perfectly still, staring straight ahead. He didn't look at us, didn't move, just sat there with his hands folded in his lap like he was waiting for a ride. The woman backed away from the car, her hand over her mouth. I grabbed her arm and pulled her toward the diner. She didn't resist. We both just moved. Inside, I locked the door and told her to call the police. My hands were shaking so badly I could barely hold my phone. She didn't call anyone. She just stood there staring out the window at her car. "How long were you in the diner?" I asked. "An hour," she whispered. An hour. He'd been sitting in her back seat the entire time. The police came about 15 minutes later, 2 officers. They approached the car with flashlights, and one of them opened the back door. The man stepped out calmly, didn't run, didn't resist. They cuffed him and put him in the cruiser. One of the officers came inside to talk to us. He said the man had a knife. He'd been waiting. The woman left in her car after they cleared it. I watched her taillights disappear down the highway and wondered how long she'd known, how long she'd felt it. I finished my shift, but I didn't stop shaking until I got home. The part that bothers me most is this. I asked the officer if the guy said anything, why he was in her car, what he was planning to do. The officer looked uncomfortable. He said the man smiled when they pulled him out, and the only thing he said was, "She knew I was there." The first time I saw the hiker, I thought he was lost. This happened last fall during a solo camping trip in the White Mountains. I'd been planning it for months, just me, a tent, and 3 days of trails. I'm an experienced hiker, done dozens of trips, and I prefer going alone. It's meditative, no small talk, no waiting for anyone, just you and the woods. I started the trail early on a Friday morning. The weather was perfect, clear skies, cool air, leaves just starting to turn. I passed a few people on the way up, exchanged the usual nods and hellos, and by afternoon, I was deep enough in that I didn't see anyone else. I set up camp near a clearing about a mile off the main trail. There was a stream nearby and the ground was level. I pitched my tent, filtered some water, and made dinner as the sun went down. It was peaceful, the kind of quiet that makes you forget the rest of the world exists. Around 9 p.m., I was sitting by my fire reading when I heard footsteps. Not animal footsteps, human ones, deliberate and steady. A man stepped into the edge of my firelight. He was maybe in his 40s, wearing a dirty flannel jacket and cargo pants. He had a backpack, but it looked old and deflated, like it wasn't carrying much. His boots were caked in mud. "Hey," he said. "Hey," I replied. I kept my book open, trying to seem relaxed. He stood there for a moment, just outside the fire's reach. "You camp here often?" "First time at this spot," I said. He nodded slowly. "Good spot. Private." There was something off about the way he said it. Not threatening exactly, but too familiar, like he'd been watching me set up. "You heading out soon?" I asked, hoping he'd take the hint. "Nah," he said. "I'm camped close by." He didn't elaborate, didn't point in any direction, just stood there. After an uncomfortable silence, he said, "Well, have a good night," and walked back into the darkness. I waited until I couldn't hear his footsteps anymore. Then I put out the fire and went into my tent. I locked the zippers from the inside, which is something I rarely do. I told myself I was being paranoid, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something was wrong. I didn't sleep well. Every sound outside made me tense. The wind, branches cracking, the stream. Around 2 a.m., I heard footsteps again. They circled my tent, slow, deliberate steps that stopped every few seconds. I held my breath, listening. My knife was in my backpack, just out of reach. The footsteps stopped directly outside the tent door. I could see a shadow through the fabric, a shape standing there, not moving. I didn't make a sound. I just waited. After what felt like an hour, but was probably only a minute, the footsteps moved away. In the morning, I packed up as quickly as I could. I didn't make breakfast, didn't boil water. I just stuffed everything into my bag and started hiking. About half a mile down the trail, I saw him again. He was sitting on a rock off to the side, eating something from a plastic bag. When he saw me, he smiled. "Morning," he said. I nodded and kept walking. He didn't follow me, but I felt his eyes on my back until I rounded a bend. I hiked fast, pushing myself harder than I normally would. I wanted to get back to the main trail where there would be other people. I made it to a popular overlook around noon. There were a dozen people there taking pictures and having lunch. I felt instantly safer. I sat down on a bench and drank some water, trying to calm down. That's when I saw him again. He was standing at the far end of the overlook, partially hidden behind a tree. He wasn't looking at the view. He was looking at me. I stood up and walked toward a family with 2 kids, pretending to admire the scenery near them. When I glanced back, he was gone. I hiked the rest of the way down without stopping. I didn't see him again, but I felt him. Every time the trail curved or passed through thick trees, I expected to see him waiting. I made it to my car just before dark. I threw my gear in the trunk and got in, locking the doors immediately. I sat there for a moment, hands on the wheel, trying to convince myself I was safe. That's when I saw the note under my windshield wiper. I got out slowly, looking around the parking lot. It was empty. I pulled the note out. It was written in pencil on a scrap of paper. "See you next time." I drove home and never went back to that trail. A few months later, I saw a news article. A woman had gone missing in the White Mountains. They found her campsite, but she was never seen again. The article included a description of a man they wanted to question. When I saw the sketch, my stomach dropped. It was him. My daughter stopped sleeping through the night when she was 4 years old. It started suddenly. One week she was fine, the next she was waking up screaming. My wife and I would take turns going into her room, calming her down, checking for monsters under the bed like parents do. She'd eventually fall back asleep, and we'd stumble back to our room exhausted. This went on for 2 weeks, every night. Sometime between 2 and 3 a.m., she'd start crying. When we asked what was wrong, she'd say the same thing. "The man is looking at me." Kids have nightmares, we knew that, but it was the consistency that bothered us. Same time every night, same explanation. We tried everything. Night lights, leaving the door open, new bedtime routine. Nothing helped. One night, I was the one who went in. She was sitting up in bed, pointing at her window. "He's there," she whispered. I looked. Her window faced the backyard. We lived in a quiet neighborhood with a wooden fence. There was nothing there. "There's no one there, sweetie," I said. "He's hiding," she said. I closed the curtains and stayed with her until she fell asleep. When I got back to bed, my wife asked if I'd checked outside. I hadn't. It was 2 a.m. and freezing, and I didn't want to encourage our daughter's fears by treating them as real. The next night, same thing. She woke up crying. This time, my wife went in. When she came back to bed, she looked pale. "What's wrong?" I asked. "I saw something," she said. I sat up. "What do you mean?" When I was closing the curtains, I saw something move near the fence. "An animal," I said. "Maybe." She didn't sound convinced. The following night, I stayed up. I sat in the living room with the lights off, watching our backyard through the kitchen window. I felt ridiculous, but I couldn't sleep anyway. At 2:17 a.m., I saw it. A figure stepped out from behind our shed, tall, wearing dark clothes. They moved slowly across the yard toward the house, then stopped directly below our daughter's window. I couldn't see their face. They were wearing a hood, but I could see them looking up. My heart was pounding. I grabbed my phone and called 911, whispering into it as I watched the person standing in my backyard. The dispatcher asked if they were trying to break in. I said no, they were just standing there. She said she'd send someone. I kept watching. The figure didn't move, just stood there, looking up at my daughter's window. After about 5 minutes, they walked back toward the shed and disappeared into the shadows. Police arrived 15 minutes later. They searched the yard with flashlights and found footprints in the frost near the fence. They said it looked like someone had been standing there for a while. The grass was flattened. They asked if we had cameras. We didn't. They said we should get some. After they left, my wife and I moved our daughter into our room. She slept in a sleeping bag on the floor. She didn't wake up once. The next day, I installed motion sensor lights in the backyard and ordered cameras. My wife called a locksmith to check all our windows. For 3 nights, nothing happened. Our daughter slept fine. We started to relax, thinking maybe the police presence had scared whoever it was away. On the 4th night, the motion light went off at 2 a.m. I checked the camera feed on my phone. Someone was in the yard again. Same spot, same posture, just standing there. I called the police again. This time, they got there faster. I watched on my phone as the officers approached the figure. They shouted something. The person turned and ran. The officers chased them to the back fence. The person climbed over and disappeared. They never caught them. We found something the next morning when we went outside. On the ground below our daughter's window, someone had placed a small stuffed rabbit. It was old and dirty, like it had been buried. My daughter had never seen it before. Neither had we. We moved 2 months later, didn't tell anyone where we were going, just packed up and left. Our daughter is 6 now. She sleeps fine most nights. But sometimes when I'm putting her to bed, she'll look at her window and say, "Do you think he knows where we live?" I always say no, but I bought cameras for this house too. I worked as a night custodian at a community college for 2 years before I quit. The pay was okay and the work wasn't hard. I had an entire building to myself from 10 p.m. to 6 a.m., just vacuuming, emptying trash, and mopping floors. I'd listen to podcasts and let my mind wander. It was boring, but boring was fine. The building was old, built in the 1960s, 3 floors, mostly classrooms and offices. During the day, it was packed with students and faculty, but at night, it was a tomb. The lights were on timers, shutting off section by section as I finished each area. I got used to working in the dark. About 6 months into the job, I started noticing small things. A door I'd locked would be open, chairs rearranged in a classroom I'd already cleaned, trash I'd emptied would have new garbage in it. I figured it was students sneaking in after hours, or maybe another staff member had a key. I mentioned it to my supervisor once and he shrugged it off, said old buildings had quirks. Then I started hearing footsteps. It would happen on the 3rd floor, usually around 2 a.m. I'd be vacuuming or wiping down a chalkboard and I'd hear someone walking in the hallway. Steady footsteps, like someone pacing. The first time it happened, I called out, "Hello? Building's closed." The footsteps stopped. I went into the hallway. Nobody there. I checked all the classrooms and offices. Empty. This happened multiple times over several weeks, always the 3rd floor, always around 2 a.m. I started avoiding that floor until later in my shift, after 3 or 4 a.m. That seemed to help. One night, I was cleaning a classroom on the 2nd floor when I heard a door slam upstairs. Loud, deliberate, it echoed through the empty building. I stood there holding a mop, staring at the ceiling. My supervisor had told me I was alone. The building was locked. I had the only key. I went upstairs. Every door was closed. I checked each one. Nothing. I decided to finish the 3rd floor quickly and get out. I pushed my cart down the hallway, moving faster than usual. I just wanted to be done. That's when I saw him. A man standing at the far end of the hallway, near the stairs. He was just standing there, facing me. He wore dark clothes and had his hands at his sides. I stopped moving. My mouth went dry. "Building's closed," I said. My voice came out shaky. He didn't respond, didn't move. "You need to leave," I said. He tilted his head slightly, like he was studying me. I backed up slowly, keeping my eyes on him. When I reached the stairwell door, I turned and ran. I didn't stop until I reached the main entrance. I left my cart, my supplies, everything. I sat in my car with the doors locked, staring at the building. I called my supervisor. It went to voicemail. I sat there until sunrise, waiting for someone else to arrive. When the morning shift showed up, I told them what happened. They searched the building, found nothing. My supervisor asked if I was sure I saw someone. I said yes. He said the cameras didn't show anyone entering or leaving. I requested the footage. He said he'd check. He never got back to me. I quit 2 weeks later, didn't even give notice. I just stopped showing up. A few months after I left, I ran into one of the other custodians at a grocery store. I asked if anything weird ever happened to him in that building. He looked at me for a long time before answering. "3rd floor?" he said. I nodded. "I don't go up there anymore," he said. "Not after 1 a.m. "Why?" He leaned in closer. "Because that's when he shows up." "Who?" "I don't know," he said, "but he's always there." I never went back to that building, but sometimes late at night, I think about that man in the hallway. The way he stood there, perfectly still, the way he tilted his head, and I wonder if he's still there, waiting for the next person to work alone.